good evening, uh, uh, and I hope that you will enjoy my talk to the extent as I have desired. This talk is not of very advanced uh, details, but it gives a quick introduction about the how the accelerators have developed over the time and what activities we carry out in India in this field, and what is its application and where they use to the mankind and especially our Indian community. So I begin my talk on this particular topic, and this topic I have covered in so many themes. First, I will introduce the accelerator, and I will talk about the what we call direct current DC and linear accelerator. And there is a very good scientific basis called phase stability that helps with in operation of accelerator, especially the high power and high energy accelerator. Then I will introduce how cyclotron works, then synchrotron principles, and then I will come to the application of the accelerated particles, where these particles interact with the matter around us, and then I will dwell upon the application of accelerators in different fields. And there is a very good application of accelerators as a synchrotron radiation, that is the SR. So I'll give some introduction to that, what is synchrotron radiation from an accelerator. Then I'll give a glimpse about the accelerators which Dr. Praveen Kumar talked about at Indore. And then finally, I'll list some of the applications in the medicine and radiotherapy, which are available to the people, public in India. And then a introduction about the neutron. Neutrons are not the charged particles, but still, with the help of the other particle accelerators, we can get the neutron beams at high energy, and we can trim that to our requirements for the interaction with the matter. So, as the name suggests, the charged particle accelerator, it consists of the free particles which are derived from the structure of the atom. And we know that the charged particles within an atom which can exist in free state, they are protons and electrons. Additionally, we can charge the entire atom as by removing the electrons or adding electrons. So it becomes a positive or a negative particle which can be also accelerated. So when we say acceleration, it means we are increasing the free particles velocity, and that is the basic purpose of the accelerator, and that imparts the high kinetic energy to the particles. And this device, which are engineered and elaborated, they are simply called accelerators. Now the accelerators itself, they started along with the discovery of the particles, namely the electrons at the first place, and then the positive ions, which were called canal rays at that time in the late 18th century. And the first application of these accelerators at that time, which were very means a low side of the compared with the modern accelerator, but they were still used as a cathode ray tube and X-ray tube for imaging, and also for the in the industry and the imaging of the human body. Now, accelerators in general, they will generate the free particles, and then they will accelerate those particles under the electric field. Then these particles, when they come out in a stream, they have a tendency to scatter from each other. So you need to keep them in a group that's called focusing. And then finally, the accelerated particles are eventually led to some application by guiding them with the help of an electromagnetic field up to the point of interest. So with this, let me give a little elementary dynamics of the particle. Kinetic energy, as we know, of a body is expressed in the units of ergs and joules, which most of the science students are familiar with. And here I am using the M0, half M0 V square. M0 stands for the rest path, because in the theory of relativity, we know that as the particle velocity increases, there is the increase in mass also. So rest mass, this is, we are familiar with the general general bodies. For electrical charge, then when the particle is carrying some electrical charge, we usually measure or express its energy, kinetic energy, with the help of the potential in volts through which the particle is accelerated, and then the charge carried by the particle. So volt into coulomb, that is the kinetic energy imparted. The basic unit charge which is carried by the electron or single electron and single proton is a very small unit. 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 coulomb. Looks very small unit, but it's very interesting to know that the multiples of this charge are mostly used in the ions. So the energy is expressed not in the terms of the ergs or joules, but in terms of the charge multiplied with the voltage to which it is accelerated. So this unit is called electron volt. This electron volt itself is a very small unit as far as the particle energies are concerned. So these are expressed in the terms of the kilo electron volt, million electron volt, and giga electron volt. So everywhere there is a factor of 1000 increasing. Now, why at all we need accelerators? So it comes that as soon as the accelerators were invented, they were electron accelerators, and they generated glow, that's a fluorescence in picture tube. So it was used for that fluorescence, as well as it was used in the generation of X-rays. So when they hit a high heavy matter, heavy particle, heavy metal, they used to emit X-rays which were deep penetrating. They could penetrate through the human body. So they were used for making the X-rays which are still in use. Now, at this, after few years of discovery of these particles, the natural radioactivity was discovered, and then they used to call it alpha, beta, and gamma particles. So it was realized that beta particles are same as electrons. Gamma rays were same in nature, I mean the physical nature as X-rays, and alpha particles were same as the ionized helium atoms, helium ions, you can say. So these were found to have many kind of interaction, not just one single type of interaction, but many interactions, which we now call scattering, ionizing, and they were absorbed. And in this manner, when they penetrate or they interact with the matter, they lose their kinetic energy. So this is depicted pictorially. You can say that these are the accelerated particles with the old name of alpha, beta, gamma, and N stands for neutron. So when they, this is the matter, and when they hit this matter, so the alpha particles or the ions or the protons, as we can call it. Proton is nothing but a hydrogen atom from which electron is removed, so it becomes H plus. So when they enter the matter, they get scattered, and they, during that process, they ionize the material, and then they lose their kinetic energy. Beta particles or the electrons accelerated when they interact with the matter, they ionize this matter. At the same time, they generate what is called Bremsstrahlung. That is the X-rays are produced, and then they can these X-rays can again, or the Bremsstrahlung X-rays can again produce what is called pair production. They can again produce electron and positron in pair, and which can further ionize, and in this way the cascade is developed. Gamma rays, they also ionize the matter, and they get scattered multiplically, but they have a great penetrating power. That is, their interactions are very minimum. So most of the gamma rays, they will penetrate to the matter, but during the process they will ionize it. Neutron, as I told you, is also considered as a particle of interest, and most of the reaction of the neutron with the matter is that it gets recoiled, it can be captured, or it can just penetrate to the material. So these interactions occur at the moderate to low energies. At high energy, what you can think of the reactions. That means a fast moving, say, for example, alpha particle, when it approaches a matter which consists of so many atoms or molecules, so it is having energy, so it can overcome the electronic repulsion, and it can hit the nucleus, which is a cluster of again proton and neutron. So during that process, it can get scattered, or it can be absorbed by the material. So you can have a new element. Actually, one of the application of the earlier accelerators was to have this kind of reaction, and there's a transmutation was the subject of interest in the earlier application of the accelerator. So what we can say is that in general, the energetic, that is high energy particles, they can interact with matter in more than one way. Same particle, same energy, and same material, but inside the reactions will be different. So the probability of a specific interaction, these are expressed at what we call as cross section. So this cross section has got a unit of area, very small unit used in terms of barns. Barns is the unit interaction cross section, which is 10 power of minus 24 centimeters. That's what I say. Okay. So with these basics, let us see what was the first accelerator. First accelerators were simply the cathode ray tube. So for the generation of the high energy particles, in the earlier stages, you need to have an evacuated tube, glass tube they were having, and then you connect it to a vacuum pump. You remove all the air which is inside this tube, and then you apply a voltage with a anode and a cathode. So at certain voltage, high voltage of the order of 2 kilovolts, this whatever is the rarefied air becomes conducting. The particles then they travel and hit the anode. So this was the first evidence of having a negative charge in the which was called electron. And later on, what they do is this cathode was improved with the help of a heated filament. So you could get more and more electrons. At the same time, it was observed that some positive particles were coming towards the cathode also. So when they punctured, they made some hole in this cathode. They found that these particles can be detected on the other side of the tube. On this side, you can detect electrons. Here, you can detect the positive ions which are accelerated through the voltage. So, for example, if electrons were hitting here with at 12 kilovolts, then we'll call this electrons here at the 12 kilo electron keV energy. Now, you need to remove the air whenever you want to accelerate particles, because air can scatter these particles, and the particles can lose their energy after some traveling some distance. Now, this was the earliest accelerator. Now, the Present-day accelerators are constructed in some in this way. The practical accelerators shown in a schematic way. So you have the heated filament, which is called electron gun because it emits the electrons when it is heated with some electrical current. And then you have this evacuated chamber, which consists of some electrodes, so that you apply a voltage here to this cathode negative voltage, and you apply some voltage, and through these electrodes there will be a gradual potential drop. So if this is at a high negative voltage, this side will be at the ground terminal. So these electrons, looking at the negative voltage, they get expelled and they get attracted by successive electrodes. And when they come out at the ground potential, that time there is a place called scan horn. Scan horn is actually this electron beam will be of the order of a few millimeter in size, which is of less use. If it hits some place, it will puncture, it will burn through. What they do is they provide a magnet here, they apply magnetic field perpendicular to the paper, so that the electron will get deflected in up and down direction, just like in a TV picture tube, earlier TV picture tube. So this energy of the electron beam will be spread over a larger area, and then it has to come out in the air. So there is a very thin window. This window is a boundary between outside atmosphere and the vacuum of the accelerator. So in this way, you take this electron out, and there will be some application here to make use of these electrons in some way, which we'll discuss later on. So in this way, this is the basic principle on which these means the low energy electron accelerators are working. See, same principle will work if you can provide a positive ion here, and you apply a negative positive voltage here and ground potential here. So these positive ions can be also accelerated toward the ground voltage. So this will be the okay. Now, so I will tell you the high voltage accelerators. So these the accelerators which I explained, we are working in the low potential, and really high potential generated of the order of a million volts, that was generated in an accelerator which we call as Van de Graaff accelerator. So here there is a metal dome, and this metal dome is connected electrically through a charging belt to the ground potential. It's the ground here, and you apply a voltage potential, spray the charge here with the help of a charge point on the belt, and belt it carries here to the top, and another charge point will take this charge to the outside of the dome. It's a metal dome, so uniformly charge will be distributed on the outside. Here you keep an ion source, and this ion source will be again the same way I was explaining the filaments of the electron cathode tube. This ion source will generate the positive ions. When these positive ions are there, this dome will try to repel them, and this tube is kept at high vacuum. So these free ions, positive ions, will be expelled towards the ground potential, and you will have a beam coming out at the high potential. So if you can generate a 5 million electron volt, and then the single charge hydrogen ion, then the hydrogen ion will arrive here with 5 million electron volt energy. So this is the basic on which the Van de Graaff accelerators were used for very long time. Now, this same thing was utilized to a greater extent in what we call as a tandem accelerator. So this again, working on a similar principle, you have a charging chain here, this thing, and instead of this dome, you have a polished cylindrical dome here, and this dome is connected such that high potential is positive potential is generated in this particular portion, and what will happen if you have a ion source towards the other end of the acceleration tube here. So you have a negative ions and it is positive potential. So it will attract all the ions here, and when they reach this high potential, there is a thing called a stripper. So the negative ion means there is some additional electron on the particular atomic species or molecular species, and when it passes through the stripping chamber or stripping foil, then these electrons will be removed, from excess electrons will be removed, and this becomes a positive ion. So positive ion inside a positive terminal, we get again repelled towards the ground potential. So what the advantage is that if you generate 5 million volt here, you accelerate by 5 million volt here, and again another 5 million volt. So the effectively you are getting 10 million volts from the single charging. So this kind of tandem accelerators, they have been built, they are still being built, it's still under use, and they operate at this potential here in the range of 25 to 35 million volts. So that is the limit of these accelerators. Now, the only drawback with the electrostatic charging and use of beam is that you get a high energy particle, but the beam current or the number of particles which can be carried out this way, they are limited by the beam power to only few watts or maybe at the most 1 kilowatt. So if you want a beam of a higher beam power, then you need what is called a different kind of a power supply. So this is the more I will say the more modern accelerator which is used, and this is used basically to generate the electron beam. And here you have an RF high frequency oscillator which supply power to a transformer at high frequency, and then this high voltage is used in the form of what you call insulated core transformer. So there will be some secondary will be in the insulated from each other, and each voltage will be rectified and added to the next particular secondary coil. So in this way, you build a very high potential here, and at the same time, the transformer can carry a current, very high current. So you can get a beam current here, which is in the which will give a beam power of the order of kilowatt. So this kind of accelerators will look like something like this, and here you have the same thing. You have a scan horn. You are a magnet. So the beam which is coming through the beam tube is scanned over a foil, and when the electron beam comes out, you basically run a product below that particular thing in a beam window, and then it will be like a sweeping. It will be sweeping on the product, and you have to keep on moving the product because the product will get heated up with the beam power of a few kilowatts. So this kind of arrangement is called DC electron accelerator, and many accelerators are built, and you will be wondering that these are the units which are used in numbers exceeding some 10, 15,000 units may be operating all over the world, but they have a beam power which is high beam power. The energy is not very high. There are 3 or 4 or 5 million electron volts. And there is a reason I will explain to you why we go for high power but not for very high energy. Then we are processing the material. We'll come to know it later on. And this is what is happening. Now, the high voltage, when you want to work on a high voltage, the problem is that you have to have a high voltage breakdowns around the point of the highest voltage. So there is a limit. You cannot go beyond a certain voltage. So for that, there is a new device was contemplated, and these devices are called linear acceleration, incremental linear acceleration in a cyclic way. So to explain in a principle, let us have a series of copper tubes. So when you apply, you connect these copper tubes alternatively to positive, negative, that kind of a terminals of this oscillator. This is oscillator which is generating the alternating high voltage. Now what happens? Suppose you have a source here of ions, positive ions. So as soon as the ions come out, it sees the positive voltage and negative voltage in this copper tube. So it gets accelerated by a finite voltage, which is not very high voltage. But once it enters this tube, because there is a feed-free region, so this particle will drift through this space, and you adjust the frequencies or the time period such a way that by the time it comes out here, the potential of this particular tube will change to positive. So again, it will get an acceleration kick here. Okay, and then it will be drifting. So these are called drift tubes. These are the hollow copper tubes. So particle gets accelerated in the gap between the tubes, and you have to adjust the length of the tube in such a way that the velocity of the particle is always such that the time period of periodic reversal will be matched with the length of the tube. So in this way, what will happen as the particle velocity increases, and since you have to keep the same time period, you have to keep a longer tube to allow it to drift for the same time. So in this way, the length of the tube will keep on increasing. So this is the way in which we call it linear acceleration principle. Okay, so this is what I am explaining. So there is another limitation. As the particle velocity increases, the length of successive tubes increase to maintain that synchronism. So you can imagine that if the particle velocity increases too much, and what is going to happen? That tube will become unnecessarily very long tube. So this is how the actual accelerator will means linear acceleration. You have these drift tubes. Okay, you have a radio frequency power source here. So you generate electromagnetic waves so that at the gap the particle will keep on moving always in synchronism and keep on getting accelerated. So in this way, this linear acceleration works. And in this way, you can accelerate both electron and proton and ions in a linear accelerator. Now, this linear acceleration will follow a certain principle which is called the phase stability. Now let me explain you, because it is important for people to understand the accelerator. Now, suppose in a acceleration, the particles were traveling in a stream or a cluster. Now, if there is a particle, this is the voltage through the gap which is varying. Now, if the particle is arriving too early, for example, this N1 particle is arriving too early from a decided phase uh, of the electric potential, then it will get a, a, a less potential. That means it will see a less voltage here, and then it will move slowly. Now it is when it is moving slowly, what will happen? It will arrive late in the next position. So arriving late means suppose it is arriving near the position M1. Now it will get a higher voltage here because of the time variation, and then it will in the next phase it will arrive still early. So like this, the particles will keep on going up and down through this region. So what will happen? The particles will try to keep in a bunch or a cluster, and they will be. This is called the phase stability phenomena. So because of this, if there is some error in the particle arriving and it means acceleration, they will get adjusted, and particles will always remain around a synchronous point. They will not move beyond, they will not move below. If any particle is having below that, it will not be accepted in this particular stability region. So this is what is called the stability phenomena. Because of this, so many incremental accelerations they were possible, and this effect is also utilized to form the bunches of charged particles. Bunches means the clusters of charged particles. So all accelerators which is having incremental acceleration, that means one means gradually they are increasing their kinetic energy. So they will be following this particular principle. Now, I was telling you the length of the tube in linear accelerator may increase. So for that, the another development was what we call is cyclotron. Now cyclotron, let us think here. Suppose there is a positive ion, H plus ion, which is injected with some initial velocity v into a magnetic field which is perpendicular to the velocity v. Now, this ion will get a bending or the acceleration toward the center of the for example, this circle. And when doing this, what will happen? There will be a balance between the centrifugal force, which is mv square upon r, and the magnetic interaction force, which is q velocity and the magnetic field qvb. So this is the charge, this is the velocity, and this is the intensity of the magnetic field. So this equation balances this particle, and it will continue to go around a circle in this magnetic field. Now, if you adjust this equation, what you get is omega is this orbital frequency of circulation will be the charge, magnetic field, and the mass of the particle. So this thing is this balance is struck. Now, how we can use it? Use this in an acceleration is explained here in a cyclotron. What you do is, again, now I'm just looking at from the above. Suppose you have a particle, charged particle, injected in the near the center of this circular magnetic field, which is perpendicular to this plane which I am showing you. So it will get bent here. Now this circle is made of two D, we call it D. It is a hollow copper conductor tube, two halves, and which are connected to some oscillator. So what will happen when this particle takes a circle and comes here? it will be attracted to the say negative voltage here, positive ion, negative voltage here. So it will get accelerated along this gap. It will travel to a higher circle, and when it comes back here, by the time the field has again reversed, so it will get another kick in this. It will so that means it will spiral in this gap, through this gap. So it looks like that is the incremental linear tube. You have bent them into the arc. So in a small space, you can accelerate particles to a desired higher energy, and toward the periphery, you engineer some, or you improvise some kind of a shielding from the magnetic field. So this particle, instead of getting further bent, will travel straight line and it will come out of the accelerator. So this is the principle on which the cyclotron, and here in the cyclotron, this the orbital frequency, orbital velocity of these particles at each of these circles will be constant. Okay, so this is given by this particular equation. So you need to connect it to a alternating source of voltage between these two terminals. Now, in the actual practice, the configuration will be like this. You have two magnetic poles of electromagnet, up and down, say north pole and south pole here. In between, you have this D, that means the hollow disc with a air gap is cut in between. Okay, and then this particle beam will come out toward the end. There are many ways in which this particle can be taken out. One is by the electrostatic deflection also. That means you apply a voltage here, so beam, instead of going inward, will be traveling in a straight line. It will be deflected in the other way. So this is the way in which the cyclotron will keep on working. So the cyclotrons can be used for proton and ion. Basically, it depends upon how fast the particles can travel. So you have to adjust the frequency. So in the olden days, the radio frequencies or the power oscillating frequencies and voltage were very difficult to build. So, but this can be used for ion and proton acceleration. And still, these are used for the isotope production for medicine in a hospital because of the compactness. That means you have you can have a folded linear path. Okay, so these are very large number of such cyclotrons. They are in use in hospital. Now, the limitation in the maximum particle energy comes from the relativistic effect that I'll explain in the next position. So for protons, this limit is something about 25, 30, or maybe 35 MeV. So what will happen in this such cyclotron is that this is the orbital frequency, omega, derived in the earlier thing, and this is the QB upon M. This is the orbital velocity of the particles. Now, what will happen at high velocities, that the velocity of the particles increase, this mass is no more constant. We know from the theory of relativity. So this will become m0 times gamma. Gamma is the ratio of this high energy mass to the rest mass. So it will increase this as gamma increases. This synchronism, this constancy of this omega, that is lost. So the particle will arrive late because of the increase in the mass. Particle will take longer time to come back, and in the meantime, the phase stability slot is lost. So how do we overcome? Now this is overcome in a device called synchrocyclotron. Now, in the synchrotron, what is done is, if the particle takes longer to come with the increase in the mass, the frequency of the oscillator is reduced so that it matches with the time period taken by the heavier particle because its mass has increased. Other method is called isochronous cyclotron. In isochronous cyclotron, what is done is the B, that is the magnetic field along the as you go radially away from the center of the cyclotron, this B is increased. So what will happen? So B is increased in terms with the M, that is the mass, so that the frequency of arrival, orbital frequency will remain constant. It will match with the oscillator frequency. So this is called the isochronous cyclotron. Now, so these are the examples how this cyclotron look like. See, it's not a very big unit. Of course, it's very heavy, but this is the unit which can be put in a room in a hospital, and this is used to generate the fluorine 18 isotope. We'll come to know about how this isotope is produced, what is it usage. But this is the main purpose for which these cyclotrons are used in a hospital. There is another application of cyclotron, and which is used in the radiotherapy. This is a very big setup. Here you have a cyclotron, and from the cyclotron, this beam is taken out, and it goes to a room where a patient, you can say, a very small patient. Compared to that, this is a very big giant machine, and this beam is taken to the patient, and this particular thing is called gantry, which is used to rotate around the patient so that if there is a cancer tumor, this tumor can be irradiated from the all say 360-degree from in the body. So this kind of accelerator is a proton beam therapy accelerator, and here I have described as a isochronous cyclotron. That means the field increases along with the as you go away from the center. So this requires a much bigger room, a much bigger setup, but still this is being used for the proton beam therapy, which I will explain how it is useful. So in this way, you can go to a high energy of cyclotron, high energy cyclotron by these improvements of isochronous and the synchrocyclotron. But even then, what happens? These magnets, they become very big, very bulky and very big. Now, means working on this circular acceleration principle, the devices used for electrons, they were called betatron and microtron. Now, these devices, they have become obsolete almost now, because electron linear accelerator is more compact, and it can be used for radiation therapy and other applications on a very compact basis, much less space and much less weight of the machine. Now the limitation in the maximum particle energy, even in the improvement in the cyclotrons, comes from the physical size of the electromagnet. So if you want to go higher energy than that, the option is called synchrotron. Now how the synchrotron is, first thing you will notice here is that compared to the cyclotron which I explained, the magnet mass from the center of this particular device is removed. This iron is removed, this magnet is removed. So particles don't have to go and higher. But what happens? Some pre-accelerated particles, they are sent into this particular device. So only the rims of the magnets, they are kept here. So these are much less in weight, but they are more in number. Now what will happen? These particles which come here into this synchrotron, again these will be the bunches, and they will go along a fixed path around. Depending upon the energy, the magnetic field is maintained, and then there is a place where the acceleration voltage is applied. So once these particles are coming here, guided by the magnet, come to this place, they get a electrical potential for in their kinetic energy. So this particle will go, once you stop injection, these particles will go round and round, and as their energy increases, you increase the magnetic field so that the orbital, the radius remains same. So by varying this magnetic field, you can contain these particles into a stable path. So this is the basis of synchrotron. So every time the particle comes to this acceleration cavity, it sees a right potential, right phase, and this can be placed at other places also, but they have to be synchronized. So this is the basis on which the synchrotrons are built, and when the desired energy of the particles is achieved in this way, you can extract them by disturbing the magnetic path somewhere, and these particles will travel through a beamline to the desired place. So this works in this way, that you send a stream of particles, okay, at some particular energy, you store them, you contain them within this magnetic path, and if you wish, you can push more and more particles to merge with these particles. And once that injection is stopped, then you increase the magnetic field and the acceleration voltage. So these particles will increase in energy, but they will ride on the same path again and again till you get the desired energy. You extract them, and then they take it to where you want it. So they work in a pulse manner. This synchrotron, it will work. You have this thing. It's like you are loading the cartridge in a machine gun, and then you are firing machine gun. Now when machine is empty, again you load with the new particles, again accelerate and again take it out. So this in this way, the synchrotron in this principle is it is operated. Now there is a synchrotron where the proton energy can be increased to not only giga electron volt, but it can go up to the tera electron volt. And in the case of electrons, it has been built up to 100 giga electron volt. The reason is, when these particles are orbiting in this synchrotron, if light particles like electrons, they will lose some of their kinetic energy by means of synchrotron radiation at each of these bands. Okay, and when they are losing this energy, you have to push more and more power through this RF cavity. So there is a limit will come when you cannot push more power through the RF cavity than what is lost by the synchrotron radiation in going around this particular orbit. So the electron limit is at a low energy, but protons being 2000 times heavier, they have a less loss of synchrotron radiation, so they can be taken to a higher energy. So this is the basis on which the synchrotrons keep on operating. So now I'll just show that the capability of the science and technology is such that the world's largest synchrotron is accommodated in an underground tunnel, which is 27 kilometers in circumference. So this synchrotron is located in Geneva. In the beginning, this was called LEP, Large Electron Positron Collider. So there were two rings inside the same tunnel, and they used to have the colliding beams of electron and positron, which was operated in 1989, and it was stopped in 2000 to build another, means in the same tunnel, another set of components was installed, and that accelerator was called Large Hadron Collider, LHC. So this large electron positron left will be shut down, and LHC was built from 2000, and I think this was operated sometime 2005 or 6, something around that. So here the energy of the particles, that is proton and antiproton, that was 6.5 TeV each. Now this, you can understand, this is the limits of technology in which the accelerators have been built, and they were so expensive that not a single country will be able to make them, build them. They were so expensive in search of the the fundamental nature of the particles and the matter. This was the objective of this collider. So this so many nations contributed their resources to build this LHC. So now coming back to the more ground reality, again, as we have explained, the interactions with the matter, I have introduced this picture. You can have scattering, and you can have ionization through the matter. Okay, you can have the Bremsstrahlung emission because of the charged particles interacting with the matter, and you can have electromagnetic shower cascade. That means if you have a high energy Bremsstrahlung, that is the gamma rays generated from the electrons, then these will be generating electron positron, which will be annihilating, again generating Bremsstrahlung, again generating electron positron. Like that, this cascade is built up. So this is called electromagnetic cascade. Now, if you have the hadronic particles like alpha particles and proton, you can have nuclear interactions which will be having recoils. That means there will be two types of we call the elastic scattering and inelastic scattering. Elastic scattering means the energy is shared between the target nucleus and the incoming particle. And in the inelastic direction, some of the energy will be shared by the target nucleus, and it will get excited. So that is inelastic collision. This is again same picture I am telling you. So these interactions will be taking place. There is another interaction called spallation, which I will explain in a separate slide. That generates mostly the neutrons will be the outcome from that reaction. So in general, the nature and the extent of interaction will depend upon type energy of the particle, nature of the target matter, and the reaction cross section, which I introduced earlier. The probability at some energy, the absorption will be more. In some energy, the fission will be more. So like that. So these are the basic interactions. Now, based on these interactions, you have these applications. So starting from the moderate and low energy machines, these accelerators will be used in material processing. That means for changing the properties of the material in a number of ways, basically depending upon the ionization of the material. Then in the medicine, it is used for diagnostics to generate isotopes for imaging and beam for therapy, and research and development. That means devising new material, studying the new material. Now the accelerators start installation for material processing. They exceed several thousand. Medicines are used in hundreds for nuclear medicine and for treatment. Now, research applications are creating, characterizing, and finding new usage of the material. We'll come to know this later on. What is happening in India? In Indian industry, about 100 different accelerators are used, which are mostly material processing accelerator. DC beam is used, DC electron beam is used. Then hospitals are using several cyclotrons which are producing the medicines, nuclear medicine. That's what I will explain it shortly. And large numbers of accelerators are used in radiation therapy. So electron linear accelerator, as I told you, about 25-30 MeV energy electron linear accelerator, not microtron or a betatron. So they are, because these are compact, so they are used in the radiation therapy, in the tumor, killing the cancerous cell in the tumor. And proton beam is now also being introduced for this particular application. Apart from that, in India, we have a dedicated R&D center which are focused on the accelerators. So one is at Indore, as Dr. Praveen Kumar was telling. Other is in Calcutta. It's called Variable Energy Cyclotron. And then there are other institutes which are, for example, in Delhi, Nuclear Science Center, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. There is another accelerator. Some universities also hosting some accelerators for the research with the accelerated beam. Now, industrial accelerators, where we are using, I have been telling you about the industrial accelerators. So, 5 MeV and up to several kilowatt peak power, these are used basically for sterilization. That means you have the healthcare products like syringes and the medical, material, cotton and all those things, rubber gloves, hand gloves, all those things. Then they can be sterilized very effectively by, this is a cold process, it doesn't heat anything. The beam is from externally, the beam is irradiated on this product. Now the food grains are also irradiated with the electron beam, and fruits and the marine products. So they degerminate basically the product. And there is a limit on the maximum energy of this accelerator, because up to 10 MeV accelerator beam, there is very little or no neutrons are produced by the target material. So these items which are consumed by humans, they never get radioactive. So that is the reason that you don't go to energy more than 10 MeV, and you irradiate these products. Polymerization, cross-linking of the cables. These cables are now a requirement on the high power electrical locomotives, aeroplanes, and these are fire retardant cross-linked cables. So these are used in the Indian Railways. The rubber tires, plastics, here all properties are changed by irradiation with the electron beam. Okay. At the higher power, they can be used for even the waste water can be treated with the electron beam. It will kill all the bacteria and the germs, and the water can be purified in this way. Now the radiation therapy, the electron linacs are used up to, as I told you, 20 MeV. So these electrons, these are cancer cell killings. They are used in cancer hospitals. These electron linacs. Now protons are used for radioisotope production, and at high energy, these protons are used for the proton beam therapy. Now in the Indian scenario, we are having all these type of accelerators are operating, although they are not in that much of number, but their use is increasing. Now the synchrotron radiation is another phenomenon which is useful. In this, what happens, when you have these high energy particles traveling through the magnetic field, for example, in the magnet of a synchrotron, so near at the orbit, at the bend radius, they emit radiation in the tangential direction, that is forward direction. So the spiking electron will emit radiation, and this radiation is having a spectrum. You can say as the electron energy increases, this spectrum keeps on shifting towards the lower wavelength side. So there is a called the critical wavelength. The critical wavelength of this particular 460 MeV electron beam in a particular, I mean, magnetic field will have this equation of radius and energy is to power of 3. So as you increase the energy, the wavelengths keep on reducing, and you can compare that. This is the black body radiation. This is the deuterium lamp, and compared to that, is a 2 or 3 order of magnitude even at the 400 MeV of the electron beam. So the intensity of this radiation is very high. You get all the wavelengths continuation. Only there is a cutoff at the lower energy. So in this way, you get a continuous white radiation from the in the synchrotron accelerator. And this spectrum and this particular phenomenon was so much liked by the research scientists to investigate the material that they built dedicated synchrotron radiation sources. They built a large synchrotron only for generating the synchrotron radiation. So the synchrotron radiation is used again in the, mostly it's used in the basic science, solid state physics, molecular biology, and imaging the reaction kinetics. See, I was telling you these particles come in the bunches. Now these bunches spacings are in the range of picoseconds or microseconds. So this can be at each bending magnet, these synchrotron emitting bunches will radiate radiation like a flashlight in the form of a time varying intensity, and that can be used to study the reaction and take a fast photograph of the reaction. So that is the application of the molecular biology. So they can study the chemical reactions also. Now Indian synchrotrons, India has now 2 synchrotrons. One is 450 MeV, another one is 2.5 GeV. So coming to the same synchrotron operating principle, what you have is you don't have any extracted beamline from that. All the particles are contained within this orbit, and the particle intensity is increased by gradual injection from outside. They merge with all the particles, and here the number of particles keep on increasing, intensity keep on increasing. What you get is a synchrotron light from each of these magnets. So this is what Indus 1 was looking like about 20 years ago. And this was the synchrotron light which was first emitted in this particular machine in India. And then this synchrotron was built with so many beam lines. So at each bending magnet, you see this flash of light will come out, and you can construct a research beam line at least. There is a name given to each beam line, and here the particles are injected from this side. You can see this way. So particles are injected along this. They are stored in this particular energy in the beam, and they keep on circulating. Once you stop this thing, insertion, the particles will keep on circulating and giving out light for several hours. So this is the beauty of the synchrotron radiation source. So the Indus 2 is a bigger accelerator. It requires a big tunnel. The circumference is about 176 meters. And as the number of bending magnet and the number of beam lines will be too many in this. We can see that. So I think there are about 25, 26 beam lines are there in this. And each beam line can conduct a experiment of its own. A lot of scientists are working around in Indore on each of these beam lines for new discoveries, writing their thesis. So this is the way. Now let us say the radiation beam therapy, little bit about that. So here there is a source of radiation, particle beam, and here is a patient who has got a deep-seated tumor in his body. This tumor has to be treated with the radiation so that the cancerous cell will get killed because of the high intensity of the radiation. By ionization, actually their cell structure is broken and that is why they die. Now, so if you have a photon beam, that is means the brainstorming X-ray beam from a 10 to 25 MeV electron lineage to irradiate that tumor, what will happen? The ionization behavior of this electron beam, I can explain here, is such that this is the unit, this is the X-ray how they will dissipate their energy throughout the mass of the human body, and here's the depth of the depth. So you see that the X-ray beam, that is this X-ray beam, loses most of energy in the initial portion of the as it enters the body, and after, suppose this is the location of the tumor. So even after the tumor, it will keep on irradiating the body. It will keep on irradiating the tissues. So what happens? It kills the cancer cells, no doubt, but then it destroys the cancer, the healthy cells also, which are above this tumor and below this tumor. So for the deep-seated tumor, there is a proton beam. Now you compare it with this proton beam. So the same distance depth in a body. What happens? This proton beam at 200 MeV will lose its energy for the distance. You see, it is much below this particular peak. Okay, and then suddenly it will lose all its energy in a short distance. See, between this and this is a Bragg peak, this is called. So now what happens? Beyond this particular tumor, it is not affecting any healthy tissue. Okay, and it is just at this point it is losing. The tumor is so much of depth is there. What will happen? Gradually, we increase the energy of this proton beam during the irradiation. So what will happen? This peak will shift here, 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 here. So till the whole tumor is concerned. So for example, here it is 200 MeV. At this point, the beam energy is reduced to something like say 100 MeV. So it will lose all its energy in this. So this is actually the spread out Bragg peaks are developed. So what will happen? It's only the tumor which is getting the killing of the cell. Below that, after that, there is no healthy tissue is affected, and before that, only partially it is affected, which is saving of about, so it's about 50% saving of this dose. So what you can do is, for this tumor compared to this radiation, you can give the twice the dose. So you can kill the tumor cells with double the radiation, double the amount of radiation, without having the same effect as this. And but if you want less, you have to have many more sittings of the patient for this particular purpose. So this is the biggest advantage of having the proton beam therapy as compared to the X-ray beam therapy. So X-ray beam therapy is good only for the tumor if it is in the beginning of the human body, is superficial. So it can kill it at the highest, but then throughout the healthy cells also, rest of the body it will irradiate. So the survival of the patient or the treatment will be much better if you do it with this application in mind. There is a big impetus or big incentive for building the proton accelerator for the tumor therapy. So now let me tell you how the nuclear medicine helps. Little bit explanation. For example, accelerators up to 30 MeV are used to produce what is called fluorodeoxyglucose, FDG in the short form it is called. this is the glucose, which is having, instead of normal fluorine, it is having fluorine 18. Fluorine 18 is a alpha, is a positron emitter. So what is happened? If you have a oxygen 18, that is a water with oxygen 18, not oxygen 16, oxygen 18, and if you irradiate with a proton beam, I think this threshold energy is about 10 or 12 MeV, then it will have a Pn neutron, it will emit neutron, and the water will, the oxygen 18 will convert into fluorine 18. And this decays by positron emission and 110 minutes of half-life. That means if you generate 10 curie of the fluorine, fluorine laden with 18, half of its quantity, it will remain 5 curie after 110 minutes. So this time is available to distribute this fluorine laden glucose to a number of hospitals. This is a 2 hours time. Now, how this fluorine acts? Actually, the glucose will be absorbed. The cancerous cell in the body, they have a tendency to eat up the nutrition given to the patient's body. So what will happen when you give an injection of this FDG to a patient with radioactive fluorine? What will happen? The cancerous cell will try to absorb this glucose much more preferentially. So there the concentration will be more. Now, if you do the PET scan, this is positron emission tomography scan. What will happen? This positron is captured by electron, and because electrons are available plenty, and then from that place it will emit radiation in 2 directions. And this is detected by the PET camera. And then what you see in a CT scan of this particular, here you can see, this is the CT scan. You don't see anything is in this particular body. This is view taken from the top. But if you do the PET scan, what you see, this glucose is absorbed more at these places. That means these places are having the cancerous cells, which are not visible here, but in the PET scan they are visible. Similarly, in the other thing also, you have a pancreas, is clear the CT scan, but if you take the PET scan, you see that these are available at 3 places. So that means the cancer tumors is there. So this is for diagnosis of the cancerous cell where they are located exactly in the body. It's PT. And for this, the key material is the fluorine 18, which are produced in the cyclotrons. So this is very useful. Means radio diagnostic, radioactive diagnostic material, which are produced in the cyclotron. Dedicated cyclotron hospitals are having. Now, 250 MeV cycles. So in India, we have this at dozens of hospitals. This FDG producing thing is there. Then we have DC accelerators, as I told you, in Delhi and Tata Institute and all those places. Then 250 MeV cyclotron, that is the radiation therapy cyclotron, which I explained in the previous slide. They are being built in India in 5-6 places. Only one is operational as far as I know. It is in Chennai. And second one is in advanced stage at the Tata Hospital in New Bombay. So these cyclotrons will be available for proton beam therapy. Now, as I told you, the proton synchrotron, proton has also many uses. There is a planning to build a proton synchrotron in India. The place and the project is not yet decided, but it's in the agenda. Now, how the proton synchrotron helps? Let's see. This is called a process of neutron spallation. neutron spallation process is such that if you have an incident high energy particle, say in the GeV proton, and hits some kind of some nucleus of heavy nucleus, for example, lead or a uranium or thorium. So it's a heavy mass is struck with the electron. Then you have this process called spallation. In this, what happens? There is the most of the energy is get into the excitation of the nucleus. So this nucleus can have either boil off. So many neutrons it will boil off, or it will undergo fission. So these again, there is a cross section for each of these processes. Okay, but the net result is if you have a lead target and you have 3.5 GeV kinetic energy proton, then it will produce 100 neutrons. Okay, so this is actually in this way. You can see that as the proton energy increases, the neutron production, this is neutron per proton, will keep on increasing. So at about 2 GeV, so you have this. I mean, lot of protons are produced. So the configuration, and here one more thing you will see that neutrons per beam watt, beam watt, that is the proton beam per watt. So this will keep on increasing up to about 1 GeV, 1000 MeV. After that, there is a plateau. So most efficient energy wise is available at about 1 GeV energy. So that is the basis for which India intends to build 1 GeV proton synchrotron, so that you can get the most economical way of producing the neutrons. So it will be having this kind of you will have an accelerator which will be called injector. This will put beam into a synchrotron accelerator ring, and you will accelerate it further up to 1 GeV. You can inject it from linear accelerator, say up to about 100 MeV or 200 MeV. Then you accumulate the proton beam here, and you accelerate it by increasing the magnetic field and the electrical electrical power in the RF cavity or acceleration cavity, and then you expect these protons to hit a target. This target made of lead, it will hit that target, and you will have a source of neutrons. So many neutrons will be produced in that case. So this is called spallation target. So neutrons have, I mean, these are the variants of proton accelerator. So neutrons again have many application. So these are electrically nuclear. They can penetrate deep into the material, and neutron beam interacts with the material. So you can get this scattering structure of the crystal lattice, transmission, and you can say imaging of the light element. I mean, neutrons are scattered very efficiently by low mass, that means hydrogen and carbon atoms. So the carbon and hydrogen which is used mostly in a composite material, you can take the images of those materials with the neutron beam. So you can study the nuclear properties, and for this you have a setup will be like this. You have a neutron pulse, then you have a monochromator. You want a neutron of a desired energy. Then it goes to a monitor, measures the incoming beam. Then it hits a sample. Then the neutron gets scattered. So you analyze the beam, and then a detector will detect the neutron. So in this way, you can have a neutron beam for the experiment, for the advanced science. So this is in short about the how accelerators are used for so many, I mean, decades. So they have helped in the scientific innovation, starting from the first stage radio imaging to transmutation to the synchrotron radiation to the spallation. So, and also the fundamental forces of the nature. So, in the, for example, in the LEP and in the LST. So, in short, it is told by someone that if you want to measure the technological status of a country, you find out what kind of accelerators it can build. So accelerator technology is something similar to the say, technology of the space technology or the aeroplane building. So multidisciplinary thing is there. So with that, I think we can wind up my my talk. So thank you for your kind attention.